All right, hi everyone. Thanks to Kendi and Capguy for inviting me to represent the artists of the city. I'm not sure if I'm the right one, but I'm the one here today. I want to talk about meaningful interactions in a technology-laden world. By that I mean, how do we make interactions that mean something to people, particularly when we have so much ways of doing those interactions, so much technology, so much devices, so much connected pieces. So I'm not sure if any of you know who Marshall McLuhan is. Hopefully you do. But I really like this quote: "We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." Does anyone else know the other famous quote that he said? The most famous one? Yeah? The medium is the message, which is actually pretty much what he's saying there, right? So that's why we really focus on this relationship. We really believe that interaction from one person to a device and the device to the person is super important, not just because from a user experience perspective, but because there's a possibility that that experience is actually changing them. Okay. So when we talk about meaningful interaction, perhaps we want to actually talk about what that means. So I've asked a few people, and you get different answers. I ask a hardware guy, it's how many features it is. I ask a design guy, it's how little features it has. So I'm just going to go to the dictionary definition, and then we'll probably kind of go in a subjective view, and I'll talk about what I think is meaningful, and hopefully there'll be something you guys can glean from there as well. So meaningful, according to Merriam-Webster.com, is having a clear meaning, expressing an emotional or idea with words, and having real importance or value. The interaction, of course, mutual reciprocal action or influence. Now this is interesting because if we can look at this and we can rewrite that, and it actually sounds a little bit familiar, compared, especially to those ones that do user experience, right? Visibility of system status, match between system and the real world. All right. In the work I do, it's a lot of reality-based or natural-based interfaces. So we're doing touch, we're doing gestures, like the leap in the background there. And then the last one, which is an artist I'm the most interested in, is the affective dimension. What's the value that people get out of this interaction? Okay. So again, Gerald Lanier. Perhaps you've read some of his interesting books, philosopher, writer. The most important thing about a technology is how it changes people. So again, that's kind of going back to Marshall McLuhan and how it's easy for us as tinkerers, as hobbyists, as makers to just throw everything at it, right? It's really cool. Like you pick up an Arduino the first time, right? LEDs, wow, let's add more LEDs. Oh, different colors, let's add this and that. And it's really, what do I want to say? It's really, you really want to do that, I guess, is the lack of, since I can't think of what I'm talking about. It's something that's very attractive. We want to throw everything at it, right? But as we go through, especially Luminartists, the work we kind of do, we're going through and we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to move away from just doing the cool novelty effect approach. And we're trying to move towards picking the right interaction for the right environmental or social context. So I think the best way to kind of go through this is maybe just to talk about some examples of a couple of pieces we've done, and then actually, wow, that's really dark, and then pieces that other people have done here in Ottawa, Canada, Montreal. So one of the first, before I go on, I should mention as an artist, I consider myself also as a researcher. So I'm kind of like an R&D guy. I create these little pieces and I throw them out into the world, kind of like a cultural probe for those of you in design research. And then we kind of observe how people react to that. And then hopefully that helps enlighten the next piece. So the Philosopher's Cube, which was actually made in collaboration with Algonquin Applied Research over there, was basically a projection, about a 100-foot square projection on the side of Rideau Center. And projection mapped onto it, so it looked like it was kind of part of the building. And it was this big alien cube that came down and explicitly was looking for an emotion. He was asking people questions about humanity in this case. What is love? What is war? And they'd reply with a tweet, a Twitter. This was back in 2010 when Twitter wasn't quite as popular. And then the computer would kind of use some really, really basic AI routines to come up with some sort of answer. And he'd reply. And oftentimes it was like a refrigerator poetry example. The second one, well, this isn't the second, but the second one in this slide, Medusae. was basically kind of louder. Sorry, was a commentary on consumerism. So this idea that we place ourselves on a pedestal, we block out what else is around us. When we step off the pedestal, those spikes you see there would go back, and you get a nice flat ground. And it was basically a really, really simple interaction using an Arduino and had a pressure sensor on there. And you just had to step on the pedestal or step off. People understood that, but the interesting point about it was that even though it was really simple, people got something from it. You know, the act of having to step up and then step down. There was something interesting about that. They weren't able to describe it, but there was something about it that was meaningful to them, something that gave them thought. Paths is what we'd call our multimodal piece. Maybe this one was the refrigerator sink. We threw a lot at it. In West Ottawa, we built this 30-foot long light sculpture that was basically a culmination of some design research we did within the space, finding out how entrepreneurs work with one another and why do they like working in a space like in West Ottawa. We found the three main themes were energy, collaboration, and mentorship. We focused on the energy, and we came up with about 3,000 LED lights that are placed in these acrylic beams, and they're augmented by sensors. So we have Twitter, of course. You can tweet to it. It puts light paths around. But also we have a sonar sensor and a magnet sensor. So as soon as you come in, the beams are lighting up. You walk under, you get pulses. And there's this whole idea that these two diverging paths connect in the middle, a place like in West Ottawa. And then this is a piece I'm working on for the Maker Faire in 2015. And it's called it's actually Users, I spelled that wrong, Users Experience. And it's actually fostering collaboration through terrible user experience. So I have a keyboards with the flashlights attached. You have to type on the keyboard hanging off the ground, but you have to point the flashlight at the screen to see what you're typing. So the fun thing about art is that you can do whatever you want, right? It's somewhat self-indulgent, but you're also trying to come across with a message. So in this case, I'm allowed to go with bad user experience. Dom, if I worked for him, maybe not so much. So this one's a really beautiful piece, and I love it because it's simple, but it's just amazing, particularly in how you use it. It's not about what it is, it's about how you use it. Having the person inserted into this piece makes it meaningful. So Good Night Lamp, it's made by a group in UK. All it is a connected light switch, all right, through the internet. You have one big house, it's a lamp, it's a house, LED. You press the chimney, it turns on. That in turn turns on 3 other little ones that could be placed anywhere else in the world. So this is really interesting because on the surface it sounds kind of relatively straightforward, but it's how you use it. And it was described to me by someone who does lots of traveling around the world, and he has a couple of kids at home. And so even though he may be in London and they're here in Ottawa, he turns on the light and they know that he's awake or that he's asleep. And it's kind of this connection that doesn't have to be said. And it's this really beautiful experience that comes from it where you feel like you're connected through this digital infrastructure to your loved ones. Cave Bull, sorry, I'm not French, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Basically blowing bubbles. Again, a really, really interesting contextual piece. They basically had a little pillar, as you can see, with a little bubble blower on top of it. And there was a light shining on it, a projection. So it just looked like a spotlight on it. But when you go up and you blow through it, as one might naturally do, seeing something like that, these shadows of bubbles come out. And as you see, some of them actually turn into little parachutes and balloons and other little characters. And it's this really interesting piece based on this concept of surprise. Right? And it was actually in the foyer of this mansion they kind of had a whole bunch of art projects in. But I really liked it because basically, it doesn't have to be complex. It's really simple, but it's the experience behind it. You know, that childlike wonder of blowing through a bubble thing and something happening, surprising, you know. As a kid, just bubbles surprised us. As an adult, maybe not so much, but maybe this does. iWriter. This is a really, really important social piece. It was made by some artists in New York. And basically, it was kind of the homemade eye tracker to allow a graffiti artist who unfortunately was paralyzed from the neck down, actually completely except his eyes. and he still wanted to draw. He still wanted to do his graffiti. So they basically came up with this home hardware solution using Arduinos and little PS3i cameras, and they hooked it all up to these $5 glasses they got at Shoppers Drug Mart or the like. And they basically were able to track his irises and move around and let him draw using this program they built to project onto buildings as if he was doing his art again. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to not only allow him to do his art again, but to actually show to others that things like this that would normally cost thousands and thousands of dollars are possible. And they open sourced it completely. You can go to iWriter.com, and for 20 bucks you can make your own, which is pretty impressive. 21 swings. Has anyone seen these in Montreal? 3? Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. It was actually a piece that was supposed to be temporary, and when they tried to take it away, the public outcry had brought it back. And now it's actually a permanent piece that comes back every summer. And basically what it is you can see there's lights on the bottom, but the key to it is as you swing, it makes a note. So I think they have about 8 swings in total, and as the different people swing, they're basically playing different notes. So it's kind of like playing music together through the act of swinging, just this playful nature. And again, it's from a user experience point of view, it swings. You know what to do with a swing, so you go on the swing, and then you have this nice surprise of it makes music and light. Right. This is a similar type of project by another Canadian company, Tangible Interaction, in Vancouver. And they're these Zygote balls. They're used in the Olympics. They're used at Smartcade fire concerts. And all they are is you hit them and they change colors. All right. On the surface, it seems kind of simple. But when you get a whole bunch of people together, playing around, hitting them, it's a really interesting, lucid experience, especially since the size of them. I think they're like 8 feet in diameter. So it's a pretty interesting, another interesting piece. And then this one I want to talk about because it's here in Ottawa, and I think this is a really beautiful rendition of kind of what a great use of technology. So what we often do when we use new technologies, we try to project our old principles onto it, our old ways of understanding. Keep Talking and No One Explodes is a VR game where you have one person wearing the VR helmet and they have a virtual bomb that they have to defuse, but they don't know how to defuse. It's super complicated. So the people who aren't in VR, they have a paper manual they have to go through to yell to you the instructions on how to defuse it before it explodes. Right? So it's kind of a collaborative teamwork type game, but it's interesting because the whole drawback of VR is that you're by yourself, isolated. This actually turns it on its head and makes it a feature, right? And it's a really, really great use of the technology, I thought. Okay, so there's probably a bit of a theme in here, the rule of thumb, right? If you think that something is clever and sophisticated, beware. It's probably self-indulgent. So as an artist, I can be self-indulgent, but as a researcher or designer, I can't. I have to think about the person using it and how do I mediate that experience to be not only as easy as possible, but as interesting as possible. So there's a kind of a middle ground that I play on sometimes. Okay. So what is meaningful interaction? To be honest, I still don't know, actually. I know that it has something to do with technology that's used not for the sake of technology, but for the sake of doing something we couldn't do before. I think Dom touched on this yesterday, right? And that it actually evokes something in us. It's an experience. What we focus on in Luminartists is this experience. That's why I had interaction crossed out. Is even though it's interaction, there's design, there's programming involved, it's about the experience. I don't care about the technology. It's about what do the people take away from it. Is it something different? Is it something they could have done at home? Or is it something that they couldn't have, and it's something different, something that they didn't experience before? Hopefully they'll remember, and hopefully it'll provide some sort of thought for them for later. And is it important? Is it worth it? I think that's up to everyone who makes these kind of devices to decide. I think it is. Okay. And then how does this relate to IoT? So kind of what I was mentioning it before was that there's lots of devices, there's lots of technology, it's growing exponentially. We had iPhones and Wii's just coming out 2006, 2007, 2015. We have so much more, right? So much more power, so much more devices, so much more things. It's very, very alluring to just start throwing the kitchen sink at everything. But it's about, we want to focus it. We want to focus it. We want to make something that's interesting, that's meaningful, that sticks out, something that's useful. Okay. And then this is Zach Lieberman. He was one of the ones involved in the iWriter project. So my favorite tools are the ones that help connect things, not a bad life goal as well. And that goes back to Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, is that we can't just think of these devices in a void. They change us. They change us somehow, and thus we change them. Kind of like Google. Now that we have Google, right? Have you guys ever heard of that term, the external brain? How has that changed us that now we don't have to remember all these trivial little facts? We can just Google them so easily in our pocket. Something's changed there. We may not realize it, but something's very different there. All right. Thanks so much.